Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Desi and welcome back to my nostalgia trip. Today we will be going over episode 8 of season 1 of Frasier, and this one is called Beloved Infidel. This title is based off of the 1959 movie of the same name, and the movie is about F. Scott Fitzgerald, the controversial alcoholic and interesting, potentially gay artist and author of the early 20th century. This movie follows his love interest and also goes into the darker parts of his personality. It was not received very well at the time because the actor who played F. Scott Fitzgerald did not fit the bill for the actual F. Scott Fitzgerald. But that's the name of the episode, and so we're going with. Opening scene is Frasier talking to a French woman with a very thick accent, and he cannot understand her. She keeps saying Monsieur, which Frasier assumes is mother. This doesn't make a whole lot of sense because I would assume Frasier, being a man of culture, would understand at least a little bit of French, and he doesn't. And he takes it out on Roz, who, if you can see, Roz is actually dressed very well. She's going on a date. And this is the first cougar theme of Roz because she's going on a date with somebody in his early 20s. I don't know how old she's supposed to be in this, probably like 30. So there's the cougar theme of Roz. Promiscuous cougar, whatever you want to call her. Niles comes in, is surprised to see Roz, and he's like, "Oh, Roz, fancy seeing you here. Why are you here?" And Roz is like, "Oh, well, I just thought I'd pass by and see if I can stop for a career," because she works there because she's Fraser's producer. And Niles still doesn't get it. And he's like, "Oh, well, good luck." And this is Niles being Niles, having a Sheldon Cooper moment. And it proves that he doesn't actually listen to Frasier so much because he would know, because Roz chips in all the time for the show. Doesn't really make any sense. But anyways, Frasier and Niles go out to dinner. Niles initially frets because they parked across the street, which was customers only. This is something that I do. I live out in the country, and I get very paranoid about parking when I go to the city. And if I was in Niles' shoes and I was parked across the street that was for customers for the restaurants or the stores across the street and not for the restaurant that they're in, I would be freaking out too. But besides that, they see Martin with another woman. And of course, the Crane boys, being the gossips that they are very much captivated by this and think that Martin's dating or something. And then Niles has an epiphany. He's like, "Oh, I don't like this one bit." And Frasier's like, "Well, why? It's kind of cool that Dad's going out with somebody." And Niles kind of looks around. He says, "If Dad's eating here, this can't be a very good restaurant." Poor Martin. He's always getting dunked on by his pompous sons. And then a moment later, Niles recognizes this woman as Marion Lawler, and she was a family friend that they had a falling out with like 20 or 30 years ago. And the next scene, which I thought was pretty cute, was Eddie rolling around on the couch, which Frasier hates, Daphne getting after Eddie, and then as soon as Frasier opens the door, Eddie gets down and sits, wait patiently for him. And Frasier's like, "Oh, good boy, Eddie. Good job you staying off the couch." And this just shows how smart Eddie is. And Frasier actually goes up and pets the dog, which we don't see because, like, Frasier absolutely hates this dog, but they're actually starting to get along better. So I thought that was kind of a cute scene. Niles shows up after this and for once does not hit on Daphne, which is a shocker. And he pulls out his detailed journal and it's like, "I know why the Lawlers and our parents broke things off." Is apparently he goes through his meticulously recorded journal, and it turns out that they suspect that Martin and Marion were having an affair. And I do want to point out that Niles' journal entries, he wrote these at 9, are meticulously written. He uses terms like vapid and vacuous and things like that, and he's 9 years old. And this is a further indication that Niles is actually a genius. albeit a very aloof genius that has neurodiversity. Frasier is obviously very skeptical, but Niles insists it's true. He has pictures to prove it. Well, not prove it, but to support his claim. Daphne joins the conversation and accuses the boys of shamelessly gossiping and just asks them to tell Martin directly, who coincidentally enters the room. And as you can see by the expression on his face, Martin is not very happy that this conversation is happening, and Daphne just straight up spills the beans to him. And Martin's like, Daphne, can you leave? I need to talk to my sons. And he more or less very briefly says, hey, I had an affair. I'm not very proud of it. Drop it. And this is where the episode very much takes a turn from kind of being light to very intense. Because Martin is a very honorable man, and you just wouldn't expect somebody with a strong moral compass as his to do such an act, especially against his wife. And this does add a tone of seriousness to the episode, and once again, it brings it down to earth. This is not playing like a typical sitcom anymore. The next day, Niles and Frasier are having tea at a different spot in the coffee shop. And Frasier just can't get over this. He is reeling from the fact that their dad would cheat on their mother. And remember the fact that Niles and Frasier both revere their mother. They consider themselves just like her. Their dad is this unsophisticated cur. How could he have an affair with such a woman of culture and somebody so perfect as their mother? And Niles, again, is the voice of reason, which I just think is interesting how Niles is so aloof and so detached from reality, but has such a strong sense of, can reel Frasier back in. Frasier just can't get over the fact that Martin would cheat on his mother, and Niles has to kind of corral him back in and be like, hey, they got over it, why can't you? And Frasier's just like, well, I don't have anything in common with my dad. The one thing that I respected is that he was a man of integrity. Now that's gone, I don't know how I'm going to reconcile this. It's very good. And the next scene is Marianne herself showing up. Frasier is very terse and cold towards her. And Marianne shows up to apologize for running out on Martin because she during their episode or their meeting at the restaurant, Marion basically runs out crying because she's upset by something. And Frasier is being snide and kind of rude towards her, and Marion picks up on it and asks Frasier why he's upset. Frasier invites her in, tells her the story. Marion is very sympathetic to him and says, oh, Frasier, I'm so sorry. This must have been so hard on your dad. And she's just like, what? He doesn't understand. What do you mean it's hard on my dad? She's like, oh, my dear, Mr. Lawler and Frasier's mother had the affair, not the other way around. This is a complete plot twist, and we're getting it from Marion Lawler herself. Frasier confronts his dad about this. Martin is just like, why don't you drop this? Why do you keep bringing this up? This is a terrible time of my life. I don't want to talk about it. Frasier tells him what he found out. And Martin is just like, oh my gosh, so now you know, you're digging around, you're making my life even more miserable. But he confirms it. And Frasier is just like, well, Dad, my wife cheated on me too. Frasier's ex-wife, Lilith, cheated on him. And they actually have a moment of commiseration. And Martin is blown away like this because apparently Lilith is just this Lilith is supposed to be like another Maris. We haven't met Lilith yet in this, but apparently she's supposed to be like this cold, unappealing shrew or something like that, because Martin is just blown away that Frasier's wife would cheat on him. And Frasier and Martin have a heartfelt conversation about this. Martin admits that he wasn't the best person to live with at the time and that he couldn't fully blame his wife for what she did. He tells Frasier not to hate his mother for the affair. He was able to move beyond it, but there were times that it completely tore him up, and he expresses very passionately how much he loved his wife. And Frasier actually breaks down and cries, and Martin says, "I did this. I told you this lie to protect your mother's honor because I loved her so much." I'm actually getting a little bit teary-eyed. I actually cried a little bit. This is a sitcom, and it made me tear up. Like, bravo. This acting was a freaking masterclass by John Mahoney and Kelsey Grammer. This was so convincing, and it was so deep. It doesn't feel like a sitcom right now. And of course, there's a moment of levity. Well, where Frasier, after he's done with his moment of sadness and crying, he's like, "Well, Dad, I think we finally found something in common, as both of their wives had affairs." And that adds a moment of levity. And the final scene is Eddie rolling around on the couch because Eddie is, even though he is adorable and cute, he is also a rascal. And our special guest for the day was the one and only Pat Crawley. This is her when she is 28 in 1961. She is still alive. She is 89. She has an illustrious career. Pat Crawley was very popular in the 1950s and 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, 1990s. She's still doing shows, but she was a guest star for a lot of shows. And as you can see, she is a stunning woman. And even in Frasier, when she's almost 60, she is still stunning. Absolutely beautiful woman. And she is a baby boomer icon, from what I understand, and she is known best for her guest star roles in shows like Columbo and Fantasy Island, which were very popular at the time. Final thoughts for this episode. This one was another great episode. A tier, absolutely. The emotions felt raw and real, and even made me shed a few tears, which doesn't happen in sitcoms. I couldn't see myself watching Seinfeld and getting teary-eyed, or Friends for that matter. Maybe Friends. Friends is pretty good too. But I would say the latter half of this episode played out more like a drama than a sitcom and was downright freaking intense at times. And I do want to just applaud John Mahoney and Kelsey Grammer for their acting in this because it was top tier. And it was also fun seeing Pat Crowley in this as Marion Lawler. This is very much a show made for baby boomers, and to see probably this lady probably was some of their childhood crushes, and to see her on screen was a nice little addition. So great job. Anyways, I think that's all I have for this. 13 minutes, not too long. Another great episode. Love seeing Pat Crowley on here. Anyways, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.